We're following two breaking news stories tonight, the situation in the Middle East and Vice President Vance in Los Angeles. Good evening, everyone. I'm Elizabeth Vargas. We begin in L.A., where Vice President JD Vance just spoke from the Wilshire Federal Building after taking a tour of the Federal Command operations and meeting with Marines there. His visit comes amid ongoing tension in L.A., the epicenter of the country's battle over the administration's immigration policies. Hundreds of Marines were deployed here by President Trump, along with thousands of California National Guardsmen to protect federal property after days of mass protests against immigration raids. Now, most of those protests have been peaceful, but some of them have turned aggressive and even violent, shutting down streets and businesses in downtown L.A. Today, the vice president explained why the administration felt the move was necessary.
What happened here was a tragedy. You had people who were doing the simple job of enforcing the law, and they had rioters egged on by the governor and the mayor, making it harder for them to do their job. That is disgraceful, and it is why the president has responded so forcefully what happened in Los Angeles. Number one, because we've got to enforce our borders and get so many of these criminals out of our country to begin with. And number two, when you have violent agitators who make it impossible for the law enforcement to do their job, it is necessary to protect them and to defend them.
Now, California Democrats, led by Governor Gavin Newsom, have lashed back. He called Trump's move, quote, authoritarian, and launched fierce battles in court. That may have made for good politics, but so far it hasn't made for convincing legal arguments. Last night, an appeals court ruled that the president can command California's National Guard and can leave troops in Los Angeles while the issue is debated in federal court. For more on all of this, let's go to NewsNation correspondent Nancy Liu, live in Los Angeles, just outside the federal building. Are we seeing any protests tonight, Nancy?
Only a handful, very peaceful here tonight. And Elizabeth, the vice president spent about an hour here at the command center speaking with operational leaders, indicating no end in sight to the immigration crackdown and taking some pretty sharp jabs at California leaders. Take a listen.
We have to remember that the Friday that the riots started, before there was ever a single National Guardsman, before the President of the United States had sent in additional federal resources, you had law enforcement officers who were being captured and beaten by violent mobs egged on by Gavin Newsom and other officials. It was necessary to send the National Guard to stop that process, to bring some order back to this great city.
The vice president also applauded the appeals court decision in the president's favor, allowing for continued federalization of the National Guard. About 4,000 Guard members remain on the ground here in Southern California, along with 700 Marines from the 2nd Battalion. Governor Gavin Newsom, he took to X a short time ago, posting a selfie video addressing the vice president directly, suggesting that VP Vance also visit with fire victims in the Palisades and Altadena. Again, only a handful of protesters here during the vice president's visit. He is on his way to an RNC fundraiser right now, and the governor's office is suggesting that's the real reason that the vice president is in California. Elizabeth.
All right, Nancy Liu, thank you so much. Joining me now is former Yuma Sector Border Chief Chris Clem and former acting ICE director and former acting director of General Counsel at DHS, John Sandwig. Great to have both of you here. John, I want to talk, these protests started because there was a lot of criticism of the ICE agents and their tactics, wearing masks, wearing tactical gear, wearing bulletproof vests. But Tom Homan, the border chief, says those tactics are necessary to protect the agents themselves. Can you understand his point?
I do, Elizabeth. When you work at DHS, when you work at ICE, the number one rule is protect officer safety. Unfortunately, given how elevated and how passionate the concerns are about the immigration enforcement, the mass deportation effort, the individual agents face threats, and I'm very sympathetic to the notion that they need to take steps to protect themselves. That said, I think potentially we ought to take a hard look at this. Is it being overused? Do we need to get a policy in place that makes clear, that the masks will only be worn when there are credible threats to the agents? Probably. But the idea that officers and agents need to take steps to protect themselves and their families, I can never be opposed to that.
Chris, polls do show that American support for Trump's immigration policy is starting to wane. A new Fox News poll shows 53% disapprove of his handling of immigration. A Quinnipiac poll shows only 40% approve of these mass deportations thus far. The issue seems to be the deportations now seem more and more not of convicted criminals, but of farm workers and hotel housekeepers.
Well, I say that's because it's been the 24/7 cycle since it was brought to light a few weeks ago. If this is all you're seeing, it's all we're talking about, we're missing the actual tenets of the immigration policy set forth by this administration. Look, he campaigned on this and he did this on day one, going after national security and public safety threats. We always knew that there'd be collateral damage along the way. Every one of these arrests that are made are legal arrests with the authorities. I get it, the way it sometimes is framed, it doesn't paint a pretty picture. But at the end of the day, these are people that have broken our laws. Many of them had orders of removal and failed to do that. They have a lengthy criminal history, and they're in people that are getting arrested that are here just illegally, which is a crime. What are they doing hanging out with criminals in the first place? So yeah, I'm sure there's a little more, expanding of the operations while they're there. But look, they're arresting people that are in the country illegally. And that's how you fix a broken immigration system, by holding people accountable and maintaining the integrity of the process.
Right. But John, a lot of those people don't have long criminal histories. That's what got these protests going, was the raids at Home Depot when they were picking up day laborers. We just heard President Trump this afternoon say yet again he's hearing from Republican lawmakers representing farmers and meat plant workers who are saying, wait a second, you've just arrested and deported 70, 80% of these farmers' workforce or these plants' workers.
It's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out. There's unquestionably was a shift about 2 to 3 weeks ago where the White House was concerned about the numbers of arrests. That required ICE to make a shift in their tactics away from those more targeted arrests where they're, what happens is you spend weeks looking at a target. You find somebody who has a criminal history. They can be challenging to find, but agents spend hours behind the scenes building a targeting package. Then we send a team out to go get them. They might have to do more on the ground investigating before they find him. The problem is you make one single arrest and you've spent, hundreds of agent hours making that arrest, but the quality of that arrest is very high. It could be a violent felon.
Right.
So you get this incredible impact. The administration wants a higher number of arrests. What that has forced the agency to do is do these indiscriminate operations in Home Depots, the day laborers at worksite operations. The problem is you're just not likely to find your criminals there. You might find one or two, but most of your criminals are making a living off their gang activities or their criminal activities, not working hourly labor jobs. As this goes forward, it's going to be interesting to see how the public reacts, because these people primarily, we know what the data tells us, they've been here a long time, they have U.S. citizen children, they're integrated in our communities, they go to our churches, but it's also they work, unfortunately, we rely on this undocumented labor. It's going to put pressure politically on the president, and it will just be interesting to see how long the administration can sustain this approach where you're doing these kind of mass arrests and not shift back to that more targeted approach focused on the criminals.
Chris, was it a mistake to have this goal? Stephen Miller went out and said he wanted ICE agents to make 3,000 arrests per day. First of all, can ICE agents meet that goal? And was it a mistake to put a number on it that way?
No, I think you want to raise the bar. I think, you set you go to enter a race, you want to win it. You don't always win it. You end up competing and finishing. So by setting a target, if they set it so low, then we'd be spinning our wheels. So you set a high target. I get exactly what John was saying regarding, sometimes you end up having some collateral damage and indiscriminate arrests. But no, I absolutely think we should put a high bar, raise the bar. That's how we're going to accomplish things. If we fall short of 3,000 a day and only get 1,500, that's much better than only getting 150. So I'm okay with that. I think it's a good aggressive approach to make sure that people are fully engaged in meeting the executive order and the directions of the White House.
John, the district court or the appellate court ruling that came down late last night was a huge victory for President Trump. The justices, however, did reject President Trump's argument that he can just federalize the National Guard based on no evidence. The court ruled he still has to explain and show evidence as a reason to do that. So is it a mixed verdict, or is it, I don't know, President Trump seems to feel, as does JD Vance, that it's a big victory.
It was a big victory, Elizabeth. Look, the court basically said that they're going to show extreme deference, and this was the Ninth Circuit, which typically is considered a more liberal circuit.
Absolutely. I think President Trump has spent a lot of time criticizing the Ninth District. He was really happy with them last night.
Yeah, so you have the Ninth Circuit saying what they said though was we have to give extreme deference to the president. They said that doesn't mean the president could just invoke or federalize the National Guard without any justification, but it's a very low bar. And I think what's going to be very interesting again to see here is there are two reasons why I think the president likes deploying the Guard here. One is the optics. I think he likes the idea that he's taking action, bold, aggressive action against these protesters. But two, there's an operational reason. It can serve as a force multiplier for ICE. So while the guardsmen themselves can't make arrests, they can't engage in actual law enforcement duties inside the United States because of posse comitatus, what they can do is provide backup and security for the ICE officers, which frees up other ICE officers who would otherwise do that work to now go make more arrests.
Right.
So I'm curious to see, in light of this ruling, whether we start seeing additional deployments in cities like Chicago, potentially New York. I mean, the president said he wants to focus on the big blue urban cities. Maybe this is the beginning of additional deployments.
No, Trump posted all over the United States, and our cities, our people need protection. We're the ones to give it to them. So it sounds like he's at least considering deploying the National Guard in other cities and states as well.
Yeah, I mean, he needs a basis. Like the Ninth Circuit said, he needs something. So in LA, you had there was some violence in the protests. That was enough. He's going to need something. You can't just deploy them, into Chicago without some justification. But again, I wouldn't be surprised if this was the tip of the iceberg here, and we start seeing additional deployments as this kind of mass deportation effort goes forward.
And Chris, finally, you were in charge of the border at Yuma, Arizona, the sector in Yuma, Arizona. That was a very busy border sector until now. This southern border, is practically sealed. We're talking about you can count on your hand the number of people coming across it now. It's extraordinary.
It's incredible. It's exactly what the president ran on. It's exactly what we're working on behind the scenes 24/7 starting on day one of this administration. Look, there were days where I averaged 1,500 arrests a day while I was chief in Yuma. It's averaging 6 a day. And I think yesterday or sometime earlier this week, it was under 100 arrests across the nation, which I think in modern time and record keeping, we've never had something that low. So goal one was securing the border. Goal two is this interior enforcement that's unfolding right now, and we're still working every day with goal three, and that's rescuing and finding the kids and putting these traffickers in jail. So I'm very pleased. I live in a border state right now. Our border is safe, is secure. A safe and secure border is a healthy border for both Mexico and the United States and the communities that live along the border.
All right. Chris Clem, John Sadwig, thanks, gentlemen, very much for a great discussion. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
You too.
All right, coming up for us, we're going to switch back to the very latest in the Middle East. I'm going to speak live to a former CENTCOM commander. That's the person in charge of everything happening in the Middle East, about what he thinks President Trump's next move should be. And then later, could the vaunted Mossad actually destroy Iran's Fordo nuclear facility without any help from us? We'll discuss that with an Israeli intelligence expert. All right, to the Middle East now, where those hoping for a diplomatic solution to the Israeli-Iranian conflict may have begun the day with a glimmer of optimism, but ended it with a blunt reality check. The fighting shows no signs of de-escalation, and face-to-face diplomatic talks have so far failed to reach any breakthrough. Iran's foreign minister met with his European counterparts in Geneva, Switzerland today. The end result? Hope for more talks, and of course, fear of an escalating war. What does it all mean? According to President Trump, nothing.
No, that didn't help. No. Iran doesn't want to speak to Europe. They want to speak to us. Europe is not going to be able to help in this.
Now, Iran's foreign minister made it very clear heading into those meetings today that productive negotiations, especially with the U.S., will not happen until Israel stops its bombing. Meanwhile, the bombs keep falling in both countries. The IDF released this video showing the moment an Iranian missile struck a children's daycare center in southern Israel. Miraculously, no children or staff were hurt in the blast. Israeli fighter jets, meantime, conducted strikes on dozens of military targets across Iran, taking out more of Iran's missile launchers. The IDF also released this video showing Israeli jets intercepting drones from Iran. It's unclear how much longer Iran can keep up its attacks. An Israeli cabinet secretary says Iran has launched more than 500 missiles since last Friday. By some estimates, that could be more than a quarter of Iran's total missile supply. And of course, missiles don't serve much purpose unless they can be launched. And Israel now estimates that half of Iran's missile launchers have now been wiped out. Remember, this all began last week because Israel concluded that Iran was about to fully weaponize its nuclear program. But there's a debate about that, even within the Trump administration. The president made more news on that tarmac in New Jersey today when he flat out said his own director of national intelligence is wrong about Iran's nuclear ambitions.
What intelligence do you have that Iran is building a nuclear weapon? Your intelligence community has said they have no evidence that they are at this point.
Well, then my intelligence community is wrong. Who in the intelligence community said that?
Your director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard.
She's wrong.
My next guest tonight fully understands the complicated situation in the Middle East and in the Trump White House better than most. Retired General Joseph Votel served as commander of U.S. Central Command during President Trump's first term. General, great to have you back on the show. I guess I just want to get you to react first off to this debate within Trump's own administration about the intelligence, about how far along Iran was. You know that intelligence in these operations is critical. You've got to know what's there, where it is, how to hit it. And today, President Trump said his own director of national intelligence is wrong in her assessments. Is this a problem?
Yeah, thanks. It's good to be with you, Elizabeth. Well, you know, my experience working with the U.S. intelligence community has been a very, very positive one. I had great confidence in their capabilities to tell us what was happening out here and help us understand the complicated situations around the world. So I have a lot of confidence in our intelligence community. I'm not sure I can really explain what the reason is for some dissonance between where the White House is and where the intelligence community is. But you know, there's information comes from a lot of sources. I'm sure the president is getting, or the White House is getting some from the Israelis as well, as I assume our intelligence community is. So, yeah, I hope this can get resolved. But you know, it is what it is at this particular point.
So what we're seeing right now is a premier example of coercive diplomacy. Trump is giving the Iranians 2 weeks to either give up its nuclear program diplomatically, or if not, we'll take it by force, destroy it. This is a big threat hanging over their heads. The Iranians are arguing that Israel must stop its bombing campaign in order to negotiate. That's something Israel will never do. That would mean giving up the advantage they've already gotten, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, the Israelis have expended a lot here to get to the position where they are. They essentially control the time clock. They control the pace. They control the momentum of all military operations. And while there's been a lot of damage done to the Iranians, they still have some capabilities. And as we just saw a few moments ago, they're able to land missiles and have some effects in Israel. So, but for the most part, Israel is really in the driver's seat right here. So, you know, if their objective is to remove this program, end this program, this really represents the best opportunity for them to get that done.
President Trump said this afternoon that Israel has only limited capacity to destroy that Fordo nuclear plant, that the United States, with its bunker buster bombs, alone has the capacity to destroy it. Is he right?
Well, the conventional wisdom for a long time has been that Fordo would largely be addressed by these, you know, bunker busters, large ordnance penetrators that we have that are very, very capable. This is what they were designed for. That said, you know, my own experience working with the Israelis, this is a very innovative force. They are very savvy. They likely have been working on solutions to this that we may not even be thinking about at this particular point. So I wouldn't count the Israelis out in their ability to have the effects that they want against this. Certainly, it would be a lot easier with these large bombs being dropped on the Fordo site.
The exiled Crown Prince of Iran said there isn't even a need for the United States to drop bombs on Fordo, that it's already been damaged substantially. Could he be right? Might this strike be unnecessary?
Well, I don't know. You know,
And we're not sure how well informed he is, by the way. So,
right. Yeah. So, I think, the United States military operates off a very well-developed targeting process where when we drop munitions, we go back and use our intelligence sources, our intelligence community, to derive information, to assess what we've done, to make sure we've met the objectives that we had set out at the beginning. And if we don't, then we go back and reattack it. So I think that's how I kind of think about this. I haven't seen any information. I wouldn't necessarily be privy to that, but I'm sure we are paying attention to the effects that the Israelis have had, not just at Fordo, but at other sites. And I think we've probably got some pretty well developed assessments that tell us that there's still remnants, certainly, of this nuclear weapons program that have to be addressed.
Well, and if that regime is left in power, what's to stop them from a few years from now reassembling a nuclear program?
Certainly. I mean, while there's been a lot of the scientific community has certainly been disrupted. The Israelis have targeted some of their scientists. There still is a lot of knowledge here and a lot of know-how. They've got partners like North Korea, who have capabilities there. Russia is another one who could certainly help supplement all of that.
All right. General Joseph Votel, thank you so much. Really appreciate you sharing your expertise with us tonight. All right. After the break, he grew up in Iran, moved to the United States, and fought with the American Special Ops. We have an insider's take on what life is like right now in Tehran, because he's still in touch with people inside that country. Is the regime there close to collapsing? Are people close to rising up? He'll join us in a moment. So what exactly is life like for regular people living in Iran right now? Details are starting to trickle out days after days of internet outages. So here's what we know. Thousands of Iranians have fled Tehran. We saw video of long traffic jams on highways out of the capital right after President Trump advised people there to evacuate. We also know that hundreds of Iranians are probably dead as a result of the Israeli strikes. High-rise apartment buildings have not been spared. One Washington-based human rights group puts the death toll at well over 600. Iran's health ministry spokesperson just told NewsNation in the last hour that 400 had been, quote, martyred, most of whom are civilians from the streets and from the markets. And then there are reports that people in the country's biggest cities are stockpiling food and other essential supplies. Cash machines in many locations are either empty or offline. Video shows crowds surging from mosques into central squares with people trampling and burning American and Israeli flags. Chants of death to America and Israel are being yelled by some. Well, our next guest is an Iranian American whose mother and cousins are still in Iran. He's not been able to speak with them. Nick Berg served in the U.S. Special Operations Forces and is the author of the book Shadows of Tehran. Nick joins me now. Great to have you here. So you haven't been able to speak to, internet's offline there, has Absolutely. Been offline for several days now. So you haven't been able to speak with your mom or your cousins?
No, I have not been able to get in touch with anybody. Last time I spoke with them was about 5 days ago. And they said
right after the bombing began.
Right after the bombing began. And they said everything was quiet in the area. They were, because they weren't close to any military installations or anything like that at the time. But since then, I got the news that, been reading and looking at the map and all of those things, that there has been some missiles closer to where they are currently.
Your mom's 85 years old.
Yes, she's 85.
In Tehran.
She's in Tehran,
You said
yes.
She can barely walk. She would have a hard, she's not one of those people fleeing the city.
No, I don't think she would be.
When you spoke with them last 5 days ago, what did she or anybody else tell you about what the mood of the country was? We have heard the Israeli Prime Minister make very overt pleas and addresses to the Iranian people. Now is the time, rise up, rise up. And yet we see that video of people burning the American flag and chanting death to America. What are you hearing about what's really going on?
What's really going on, about 85 to 90% of the people, ordinary Iranians, are against the government. And what you see on those pictures, those are the religious fanatics that every time something happens, they come to the streets and they start screaming and doing all of that. This is nothing new for Iran. It always happens. A lot of them come from villages, and the government actually sends buses to the villages and gathers these people up and pays them to come to these demonstrations. So I wouldn't take that as the sentiment.
Emblematic of what's happening
right,
there.
Exactly.
If 85 to 90% of Iranians don't like the regime, why hasn't it been toppled? Why haven't the Iranian people managed to do that?
The Iranian regime kind of lives by fear, and they have killed hundreds and thousands of people throughout this last 40 years in Iran. There is actually mass graves in Iran that nobody knows about from the people that were against them. And they basically carry execution. Just this year, they carried out about 1,700 executions.
1,700 public executions.
Public executions.
Where everybody's supposed to come to the downtown and watch them kill somebody.
And watch the hangings and all of that stuff. And the thing is, right now, as I hear from some of my other friends in Iran, that there is police knocking down doors every night, arresting people. Anybody that now the new label is Israeli spies. And they arresting them, even if they had nothing to do with Israel, just because of their views and stuff. So the government rules by fear, and it's the fear that drives everything right now.
Do you think that the Iranian people can rise up now that the Iranian regime is on its heels and weakened by Israel?
Absolutely. They can absolutely do that. One of the reasons they cut off the internet is exactly that, because people use the internet to organize things. So you saw that when the Women Life Freedom movement happened in Iran.
That was a couple of years ago. A young woman was imprisoned and died in prison for failing to cover her hair properly.
Right, exactly.
Lots and lots of protests, lots of arrests, and hundreds of deaths.
Hundreds of deaths. Yeah, exactly. And the first thing they did, they basically shut down the internet. So now that's I see that all of the remnants of that movement is now coming back at this point.
You can relate to this. You had to flee Iran when you were 19 years old. You had to sneak across the Turkish border to escape Iran because they were after you.
Yes, absolutely.
Why? You were a troublemaker, as you put it?
I was a big troublemaker in Iran, yes. And I did a lot of things that they didn't like. And we did a lot of protests. We did a lot of different things that I wasn't supposed to do, say it that way, at that time. And there was an execution note out, so I was warned and was able to fortunately get out of the country in time.
And you managed to make it to the United States with $50 in your pocket. You barely spoke English and ended up working for the Army Special Forces.
Yeah, for the Special Operations.
Special Operations. You can't tell me what you did because it's classified.
Right, exactly.
But you speak Arabic and Farsi fluently as well. So I'm sure your skills came in very, very handy. Have you not seen your mother since you fled Iran?
I have. My sister actually lives in Copenhagen in Denmark, and every time I want to see her, she comes over there and I would go. But in the last 2 or 3 years, I haven't been able to see her because of her health, and she can't fly. And so that's just the way it is.
What is your hope for your home country now?
My hope is for the people to rise up and have a free democratic country and join the world again. Before the 1979 revolution, the country was a beautiful country. And it was a shining star in the Middle East that helped all of its neighbors and wasn't a menace to the world. That's what we want again. We want to be that country again.
It's important for Americans to know as well. The Iranians are very educated and very westernized, one of the most westernized populations in the Middle East. They're a lot more like us than different.
Yes, absolutely. And one of the things that most Americans don't understand, that Islam is not the original religion of Iranians. Islam was forced on them during the Arab invasion. And when anybody talks about going back to their Muslim roots, there's no such thing. Iranians are not same as the other Arab countries in the Persian Gulf. Iranians are very educated, they're very westernized. Women have a special place in Iran, and one of the things I always say, there's no genderizing in Iran. If you look at the Persian language, there's no such thing as a he and a she, everything's an it. I still mess it up when I talk about it.
Well, Nick, it's great to have you, and I hope that we see something soon that will make you and your Your mother happy that the two of you are reunited once again.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nick Berg. Really appreciate it. All right, coming up for us, we were just talking with General Votel about, does it really have to be the Americans who take out Fordo, the nuclear plant that's the big target? Because actually, Israeli commandos in the past have stomped out nuclear programs in Iraq and Syria. So could Mossad take out Iran's Fordo nuclear site without American help? Our next guest is an Israeli intelligence expert who says it's possible. Plus, new alerts just now in Tel Aviv. Sirens are blaring out. We'll have more on that breaking news in a moment. All right, some breaking news going on in Israel where it is 2:43 in the morning. You've got twin shots there from Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, where we are seeing missiles in the last few moments that have been launched over both cities. It appears most, if not all, of those missiles have been intercepted or stopped by Israel's Iron Dome, but an incredible amount of activity just a few moments ago over Jerusalem, which has been a little bit unusual, but Tel Aviv as well. Our NewsNation's Robert Sherman is in Tel Aviv. He's joining us on the telephone. Robert, what's going on there?
Yeah, Elizabeth, we all just got called down into the shelters just a few minutes ago here as sirens were blaring across Tel Aviv. And I mean, I think that you have a better picture of what's going on in the world above us here as we're down here. And really, I mean, we're all going to come out of these shelters in the next few minutes and get a better picture of what we're returning to. But I mean, we're looking at the alerts along all of our devices. That's how we get all of this information. And large number of alerts here sweeping across, as you pointed out, not just the Tel Aviv area, but as well as Jerusalem, all up and down along Israel's coast put under an alert here. So you have quite literally, once again, for the second time today, millions of people running to the shelters here. And earlier today, it was a rather significant barrage. We'll have a better idea of how significant this one was when we get the all clear in a few minutes.
And I can tell you, as we look at the video of what just happened literally about 90 seconds ago in the skies over Jerusalem, that it was a pretty extraordinary number that we saw there. As I said, most of them did appear to be intercepted and stopped, but we're glad you're in the bomb shelter yet again. Once again, as you pointed out, Robert, millions of Israelis sent underground into bomb shelters in both Tel Aviv, Israel, and up and down the Israeli coast. We will keep an eye on this. This is the shot over the skies of Tel Aviv, slightly cloudier there. It's near the ocean. You'll have that. And as you can see right there, a massive sort of intercept of some kind happening behind the cloud cover. It does, my goodness, that's quite large. Robert, we're glad you're in the bomb shelter. Stay safe. Call us and let us know once you come out and assess the damage and tell us what it is. Thank you. All right, President Trump met with his national security team again today about that situation in both Israel and Iran and about the conflict between the two countries, a day after the White House announced a 2-week deadline for his decision on whether or not to drop an enormous bomb on the Fordo nuclear plant, as Israel wants him to. Trump says that deadline of 2 weeks gives him some time now to see if, quote, people come to their senses.
Giving him a period of time. We're going to see what that period of time is, but I'm giving him a period of time. And I would say 2 weeks would be the maximum.
President Trump has made it clear he does not want American boots on the ground in this war, but he is considering dropping a bomb on Iran's most critical nuclear enrichment facility named Fordo. We've been talking about it every night. Iran built Fordo deep inside a mountain precisely to shield it from such attacks. But experts believe the United States still has the capacity to destroy the facility with something called a bunker-busting bomb. It sounds very simple. It's one of the world's biggest security threats, eliminated by a magic bullet, albeit a 30,000-pound magic bullet. But while war might be many things, simple is not one of them. To completely destroy Fordo, some experts say the United States would need to drop not one, but a series of these massive bombs down the same hole. And the president wants some reassurance that whatever option he chooses will, in fact, work. This has never been used. What the United States does, the United States does not need to get any more deeply involved in the Middle East conflict at all. Most Americans don't want the U.S. going to war at all. In fact, only 16% of Americans polled by The Economist and YouGov support U.S. military action there. Our next guest has heard from his well-placed sources that IDF ground forces might actually be able to assault Fordo on their own with the help from Mossad, the spy service inside Iran, and that is currently working in Iran. That would leave the United States apparently out of the conflict. President Trump, however, expressed doubt this afternoon about Israel's ability to destroy Fordo on its own.
They really have a very limited capacity. They can break through a little section, but they can't go down very deep. They don't have that capacity, and we'll have to see what happens. Maybe it won't be necessary. Maybe it won't be necessary.
Joining us now is Dan Raviv. Dan knows more about Israel's spy agency and its defense forces than just about anyone else. He spent 4 decades as a major network correspondent, much of that time in Tel Aviv. He's also written 5 books on Israeli espionage, including Spies Against Armageddon, Inside Israel's Secret Wars. He's also the host of Mossad Files. Dan, great to have you back on the show. So, part of the push to get the United States involved is so that we can destroy Fordo with this bunker-busting bomb. But there is a second scenario, right, where Israeli commandos go in on the ground, but could they destroy it?
Oh, Elizabeth, you really got that right. I don't think that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu would have given the order to start this war, right, exactly 1 week ago, if he thought that he would then have to depend on President Trump to order B-2 bombers to drop those incredibly heavy bunker buster bombs. So the Israelis, I'm sure, have a plan. Could commando troops go and take over Fordo and little by little, oh, who knows, starve out the people, drop explosives down the ventilation shafts, eventually get onto the elevators and go down? I think so. But here's a really strong precedent, Elizabeth. In September of last year in Syria, when there was a lot of tumult, they were on the edge, of the Assad government falling, Israeli commandos flying low-flying helicopters got into Syria to a similar base that the Iranians had built in Syria to actually build precision-guided missiles for Hezbollah, the Shiite Muslim extremists. And the Israelis got in there. They sent a squad at that time of 120, 60 to assault the base, 60 to surround the base. There was air cover, ready to bomb any opposition. I take this as a model for what they could do to Fordo, because in Syria, totally successful. All the Israeli attackers came back. And by the way, they planted 660 pounds of explosives and blew up that base, Masyaf, in Syria.
Right.
So I think they could do it again.
Fordo is 300 feet below ground. This would be incredibly dangerous and intricate and tricky for Mossad agents to go in there if they're going in there without having had a bunker-busting bomb going in first.
Well, the bomb, in fact, would mess things up, and Israel prides itself on trying to get intelligence. When the Israelis destroyed Iraq's nuclear reactor, that was 1981, that was just Israel's Air Force bombing the one target in Baghdad. In 2007, the Israelis, keeping it a secret for a while, destroyed a Syrian nuclear reactor that North Korea was building. But before that, the Mossad actually went there, took soil samples, determined what kind of uranium enrichment was taking place. And so I think in a way the Israelis would almost prefer that they do it on the ground in a more patient way. However, Israeli sources are saying that if America would get involved, it'll be quicker, and they would like that. But if not, the Israelis are confident they can do it.
Right, but so Dan, there's been huge pressure from the Israelis on President Trump to authorize this. And this is a violation of precedent. Israel has never once asked the United States before to come in and help fight a battle. Israel has prided itself on fighting its own battles.
Yeah, I think a big part of that is political. Now, some of it, as I said, my sources say it would be quicker if the Americans would bomb it, but the Israelis aren't counting on that. However, they would love for the U.S. to be involved in this war to help make the case that Iran is a country that wasn't just working on developing nuclear weapons, but has been trying to spread its Shiite Islamic revolution throughout the area and supporting terrorist groups. So, of course, Israel would like to know that the U.S. is firmly on its side. But they're aware of the political opinions, the opinion poll that you showed. And so, again, Israel's not counting on it, but they'd like it to happen if President Trump says yes.
We shall see. Dan Raviv, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. All right, coming up for us, President Trump has said his Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, is wrong about Iran. So who is right? Chris Cuomo joins me live next with a preview of that discussion. All right, as we showed you at the top of the show, it's a pretty extraordinary moment late this afternoon when President Trump on the tarmac in New Jersey said he flat out does not think that his own Director of National Intelligence is right when it comes to how far along Iran was in developing a nuclear weapon. Chris Cuomo joins me now. Chris, this is a very extremely high tension moment, high stakes moment. And to have President Trump and his own DNI on different pages of the book, so to speak, not good.
I agree with the premise, but I don't know that that's our situation. I have a feeling that there's a little bit of a Fugazi factor here with this. So I read Gabbard's testimony, okay? Time I will never get back, by the way. But in defense of Gabbard's position, she said they are enriching uranium at a rate that they should not. They don't believe they are in the assembly phase. And I think that is contextually what she means when she says they're not making a weapon yet. They're not in the assembly phase, but they are enriching too much. And Trump today was fed that question with the assumption that Gabbard said they're not making a weapon, which I don't think is really fair. And I think that this is a little bit of a distraction. You're not wrong. Nothing you said is wrong. And it is the job, but I do feel that it's a little bit of the problem.
Well, I just think you
don't worry about that beeping.
You call it Fugazi, but it's also maybe there's some nuance being lost here. I don't know. It's possible.
On purpose. On purpose.
On purpose.
Because we want the gotcha. Not us. Again,
yeah, not us.
I really do exempt us for it. I mean, I've known you forever. It's not your game. And it's not NewsNation's game because, frankly, we get yelled at when we do that, and we should. You don't because you never do it. But when I mess around with, being nitpicking, they're right. They're right to say to me, no. So I think that this is what our problem is that they want the gotcha. They want to get him sideways with Gabbard. Max Miller, the Ohio member of Congress, has this kid try to run him off the road. We see that MAGA's not having a difference of opinion about where we should be and where we're not. They're taunting each other like they're getting ready to meet for a fist fight.
Yeah.
I think that this is what worries me more than the decision we make in Iran. That's survivable either way. I feel like we're eating ourselves alive. That's my concern. That's what I'm talking about at the top.
All right. Have a great show. Have a great weekend.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.